We interrupt this program for a special news bulletin. 3 young singers who soared to the heights of show business on the current rock and roll craze were killed today in the crash of a light plane in an Iowa snow flurry. The singers were identified as Richie Valens, 17, Buddy Holly, 22, and J.P. Richardson.
February 13th, 2002. Waylon Jennings died.
Waylon Jennings died in February.
And he took a secret with him that most people still don't know. The night he walked out of the biggest recording session in music history, 46 legends froze. Not one of them dared to do what Waylon did in that single moment. That exit helped raise $63 million and saved millions of lives across an entire continent. He wasn't playing a role. He wasn't chasing fame. He was the only man in that room who refused to lie, even when the whole world was watching. A plane crash took his best friend. Nashville tried to take his soul. Neither succeeded. Why did his honesty cost him everything yet change history forever? Stay with us. The real story starts now. The night everything changed. Waylon Jennings was 21 years old, broke, and nobody. He was working as a radio DJ in Lubbock, Texas, a town so small that the station he worked for barely had enough listeners to fill a school bus. No fame, no connections, no reason to think his life was about to flip completely upside down. Then one afternoon, a man walked through the door and handed him an electric bass guitar. That man was Buddy Holly.
Buddy Holly died in a plane crash.
Holly was already a star, a genuine rock and roll force who had toured the world and shared stages with legends. And for reasons that Waylon himself never fully understood, Holly looked at this unknown kid from a tiny West Texas town and decided he was worth something. He took Waylon into the studio, bought him new clothes, produced his first recording session, and told him one thing that Waylon carried for the rest of his life. Don't ever let people tell you you can't do something. Never put limits on yourself. That was not just advice. That was a blueprint. Waylon later said that Buddy was the first person who ever had real confidence in him. Not the polite kind, the kind that changes how you see yourself. Then came the Winter Dance Party Tour, January 1959. 24 cities across the frozen Midwest in the dead of winter. Temperatures dropping to 35 below zero. Tour buses breaking down so badly that the performers had to burn newspapers inside just to stay warm. The drummer ended up in the hospital with frost-bitten feet. Everyone on that bus was either sick or close to it. After a show in Clear Lake, Iowa, on the night of February 2nd, Holly had enough. He chartered a small plane to fly ahead to the next stop. 3 extra seats. Waylon was supposed to be on it. But the Big Bopper, a 250-pound man burning with the flu, asked Waylon if he could take his seat instead. Waylon gave it up without thinking twice. When Holly found out, he leaned back and laughed. "So you're not coming with us tonight, huh? Well, I hope your old bus freezes up again." Waylon was 21 years old. He grinned and shot back, "Yeah, well, I hope your old plane crashes." They were joking, the way people joke when they're exhausted and young and believe that everything will last forever. A few hours later, that plane went down in a frozen cornfield 6 miles from the airport. Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, the Big Bopper, the pilot. All 4 were killed instantly. Waylon was on the bus when he found out. The only word he ever used to describe that moment was numb. The tour promoters forced the remaining performers to keep going. So he couldn't even attend the funeral. And for years after that night, he couldn't pick up a guitar. His son Shooter would later say that his father felt like he was living on bonus time from that point forward. That surviving when he shouldn't have meant he had to do something with the years he was given. Something shifted inside Waylon Jennings on that frozen night in Iowa, and it never shifted back. The machine that tried to break him Nashville in the 1960s was not a place that welcomed questions. The system was simple. The label owned you, the producer controlled you, and your only job was to fit into the same polished, predictable sound that every other country artist was already making. Nobody asked why. Nobody pushed back. You showed up, you recorded what they told you to record, and you were grateful for the opportunity. Waylon showed up and immediately asked why. "I always said why," he once recalled. And why was not a welcome word in Nashville. The label would not let him use his own band. They would not let him choose his own songs. They assigned him a producer named Danny Davis, a man who rolled his eyes and made wisecracks every time Waylon tried something different. The tension in those sessions was so thick that Waylon eventually showed up to a recording date with a pistol he had borrowed from Merle Haggard, and told the room that anyone still staring at their chart after the third take was going to have a problem. Nobody stared at their chart. Then came a contract negotiation with RCA Records that went nowhere fast. The label was offering almost nothing, treating Waylon like a product they could afford to ignore. Midway through the meeting, Waylon stood up and walked to the bathroom without a word. While he was gone, his manager let the silence do all the talking. By the time Waylon came back, the label had agreed to every single one of his demands, including something that no country artist in Nashville had ever been given before: full creative control over his own records. His manager met him in the hallway with a grin. That was a $25,000 piss. Once Waylon had control, the music finally sounded like him. A songwriter named Billy Joe Shaver had been chasing him for months, trying to get Waylon to listen to his songs. Waylon kept dodging him, so Shaver cornered him in a hallway and delivered what might be the most direct pitch in country music history. "If you don't listen to these songs, son, I'm going to whip your ass right here in front of God and everybody." Waylon listened. The result was Honky Tonk Heroes, the album that most historians consider the first true outlaw country record. By 1976, he and Willie Nelson released Wanted, The Outlaws, the first country album in history to go platinum. And when he became the narrator of The Dukes of Hazzard, his voice became one of the most recognizable sounds on American television. But what separated Waylon from every other rebel Nashville had ever produced was not just that he fought for himself. He fought for everyone he believed in. When Columbia Records wanted to add slick studio production to Willie Nelson's raw, stripped-down album Red-Headed Stranger, because the label thought it sounded like a demo, Waylon was in that meeting. Through the years, he almost didn't survive. Waylon Jennings once bragged in an interview that he had never touched a drop of alcohol in his entire life. Technically, that was true. What he left out was that he was spending $1,500 a day on cocaine. While he said it, "I was on drugs for 21 years, almost solid," he admitted years later. At his peak, he was consuming 7 grams a day, waking up at 3 in the morning for another line, hiding security stashes of cocaine in briefcases all over his house, so he would never be caught without one nearby. In 1977, the DEA showed up at the Nashville studio where he was recording. His drummer, Richie Albright, pressed the talkback button on the mixing board, which sent the agents' voices directly into Waylon's headphones in the recording booth. So while Waylon bought time by pointing out that the arrest warrant listed the wrong address, Albright grabbed every gram of cocaine in the room, shoved it down his pants, walked calmly to the bathroom, and flushed it all. The charges were dropped. Waylon wrote a song about it, but the drugs kept going, and so did the damage. He went bankrupt, owing $2.5 million. He got booed off the stage in Portland after barely making it through a few songs. He missed a White House lunch with President Carter because he was too wired to leave the house. She later wrote that the stress of living with him had aged her by a decade. Then one day, Waylon walked into his house and found his 3-year-old son, Shooter, sitting on the floor with a cut-off straw pressed against his nostril, pretending to snort cocaine. Pretending to be just like Daddy. It was the most devastating thing Waylon Jennings had ever seen, and it still took him 2 more years to quit. But when he finally did, he refused rehab with a line that sounded exactly like him. "Betty Ford didn't get me on it, and she can't get me off it." He drove to a cabin in the Arizona desert, went cold turkey for 30 days with Jesse by his side, and $20,000 worth of cocaine sitting on his tour bus outside. As a test, he refused to fail. When it was over, he told Jesse to go flush every last gram. She did. Willie Nelson cut off his famous red braids and had his wife hand-deliver them to Waylon as a sobriety gift. Johnny Cash threw a party. And then, without telling a single person, the high school dropout started studying for his GED on his tour bus and watching educational tapes between shows until he passed the exam at 52 years old. All because he wanted his 10-year-old son to know that education actually mattered. He never did a single interview about it. He did not need anyone to know. The room where history turned. A few weeks before January 28, 1985, everyone in American music was already watching. A British charity single called "Do They Know It's Christmas?" had just shown the world exactly what happens when famous people try to help a country they do not understand. The song featured Bono, Sting, George Michael, and asked whether the people of Ethiopia knew it was Christmas time. Apparently, without anyone involved realizing that Ethiopia is home to one of the oldest Christian communities on earth, a nation that has been celebrating Christmas for over 1,000 years.
Christmas celebrations are in full swing across the globe.
The backlash was immediate and brutal. Critics called it racist, condescending, and tone-deaf. Bob Geldof, the man who organized it, would later call it one of the worst songs ever made. America saw what happened and decided to do better. Harry Belafonte recruited Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie to write a new song, Quincy Jones to produce it, and 46 of the biggest artists in the country to perform it. Jackson and Richie spent days vetting every single line, making sure nothing could be misread the way the British version had been. On the night of January 28th, the artists gathered at A&M Studios in Hollywood after the American Music Awards. Quincy Jones put a sign on the door, to check your egos at the door. Prince never showed up despite winning 3 awards that evening.
I am so proud to give this Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award to my friend, I just love him, Mr. Quincy Jones.
Bob Dylan nearly fell apart at the microphone until Stevie Wonder calmed him down by doing a pitch-perfect impression of Dylan's own voice back at him. Willie Nelson spent the night talking with Ray Charles about doing something for farmers back home, a conversation that would eventually become Farm Aid. By 3 o'clock in the morning, everyone was exhausted. And that is when a problem came up that nobody expected. Stevie Wonder had left the studio, called a friend in Nigeria, and came back with an actual Swahili phrase he wanted added to the end of the chorus, replacing a nonsense vocal line that Michael Jackson had written. Wonder believed it would give the song an authentic African touch. Well, ain't no good old boy ever sung Swahili. I think I'm out of here. He walked out, and the moment he did, the dam broke. Ray Charles said, "It's 3 o'clock in the goddamn morning. I can't even sing in English anymore." Cyndi Lauper compared it to singing to the English in German. Geldof himself, the man who had already lived through one cultural disaster, told Stevie that the song was not meant for the people who needed help. Those women did not speak a single word of Swahili, because Ethiopia speaks Amharic, not Swahili. two completely different languages from two completely different parts of the continent. The Swahili line was dropped, replaced with One World, Our Children. We Are the World went on to sell 20 million copies, win 4 Grammy Awards, and raise over $63 million for humanitarian projects across 7 African nations. An American charity song for Ethiopia, sung partly in a language that Ethiopians do not speak, made by artists who had a clear example of exactly what not to do. Waylon did not plan to protect that song. He just couldn't sit in a room where something felt wrong and pretend it didn't. Muhammad Ali was his son's godfather. Charlie Pride, one of the most important black artists in country music history, was one of his closest friends. This was not a man who had a problem with other cultures. This was a man who had a problem with dishonesty. And when he smelled it in that room at 3 o'clock in the morning, he did what he had always done. He got up and left. What he left behind. Decades of cigarettes and a lifetime of cocaine had already taken Waylon's heart once he needed triple bypass surgery at 51. Diabetes took the rest of him slowly, piece by piece. He lost his left foot in 2001 and spent his final months in a wheelchair. When the Country Music Hall of Fame inducted him that same year, he was too sick to attend and said the honor meant absolutely nothing to him, because even at the end, Waylon Jennings was exactly who he had always been. In his final months, he took Jessie's hand and told her something she said sounded completely different from every other time he had said it across 32 years of marriage. You were my home. On his last Thanksgiving 2 months before the end, she asked if he was ready to make peace with God. He grinned and said, "I knew you were going to ask that." After Christmas, he asked her to play the old hymn she had grown up with. He just wanted to listen. His last words were simple. "Don't let the boys stop playing my music." On February 13th, 2002, at 64 years old, the outlaw who cheated death on a frozen night in Iowa finally ran out of time. Hank Williams Jr. returned to the Grand Ole Opry after more than 20 years solely to honor him. He said he had tears in his eyes the entire night. And somewhere on Shooter Jennings's wrist, there is a gold bracelet his father gave him before he died. 7 words engraved on the inside. The music is in good hands. Shooter has worn it while accepting 2 Grammy Awards. He once said that everything his father ever did after that frozen night in Iowa came from the same place, a man who knew his time was borrowed and refused to waste a single second of it on pretending. Buddy Holly told a 21-year-old kid in a tiny Texas radio station, "Don't ever let people tell you you can't do something." Waylon never did. Not once. Not for anyone. Not for any reason. And because a man from Littlefield, Texas, refused to be anyone other than exactly who he was, the world is measurably, provably, a better place for it. The cost of honesty is real. But Waylon Jennings spent 64 years proving that the cost of pretending is always higher. Waylon Jennings never set out to change history. He just refused to fake his way through it. A plane crash that should have killed him. A music industry that tried to erase him. An addiction that nearly finished what both of them started. And one room, at 3 o'clock in the morning, where every famous person on earth went silent except him. That's not an outlaw myth. That's a life. Most people spend years trying to figure out who they are. Waylon already knew, and he paid for it every single day. The real question is not what Waylon Jennings did with his life. And the question is what you are doing with yours. If this story hit different, leave a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it. More stories like this are coming.